My name is Eric Puente. I'm with Ministerio Corazones Unidos, and I wanted to share some things about the years that my wife and I have been learning through pastoral counseling in a Hispanic context. It's something we're very passionate about and love doing and feel God calling us to. And so hopefully this will be something good, something new, something that will be helpful, and something that help you understand a little bit of nuances to pastoral counseling in a Hispanic context. One of the first things I'd like to talk about is just that just getting Hispanic people into the counseling session or a counseling environment, there's a lot of times a fear of you or me as a pastoral counselor or as a counselor of different types that tells the people that they're crazy. That is a fear that I have heard from time to time about what keeps people from going into counseling. The other is the view of counseling. Counseling is viewed as not a time of instruction, of learning new things about themselves, about the Bible, about their relationships, family. It's more about they see a lot of people in the Hispanic culture see it more as something that that's someone you need it if you have a problem. I don't have a problem. I don't need it. And so that is another barrier that people have. But another one is fees or paying for counseling. If you're going to be a counselor that has some sort of fee structure and is trying to help some Hispanic families, a lot of times counseling is viewed as advice, so it doesn't make sense that you have to pay for advice. Shouldn't advice be for free? So some of the things like that, just to get people into counseling, are some of the things that we've encountered. One of the other things, factors of the Hispanic culture is the difference of viewing relationships or a system of relationships, collective versus more American individualistic. Hispanics are much more collectivist in their view of life. So this shows itself up a lot in the absence of boundaries or hardly any understanding of boundaries. A lot of times the topic of boundaries is something new for a lot of Hispanics. Um, in fact, when someone puts boundaries, almost by default, they themselves are they're seen as pushing themselves away from the group. Key is a good balance between healthy boundaries and not losing the support system or the network, the community that the family is part of. So I think it's important to take into consideration that healthy boundaries are not going to look the same for a Hispanic family as a mainstream family in the mainstream culture. Too strong of boundaries can isolate someone, and that creates other problems when their support system is taken away. Um, there's that balance requires putting some healthy boundaries, but still allowing or trying to develop a healthy support system, preferably one that is informed. Especially if the person has something like depression, that they're informed, that they're helpful, and not making things worse. Also, a factor of Hispanic culture is the strong family ties. So this means that usually Hispanic families are going to try to find help from within rather than just looking up an external or someone or something from the outside. Referrals are very important for Hispanic families, especially with pastoral counseling. Also, it's very common to see a degree of help, whether it's financial, emotional, different types of help for family that is not just the immediate family but extended family, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, cousin. That is a big deal for them, for the majority. It's a common view among Hispanics that that you just help your family. There's a lot of also loyalty to family that can come out in different ways, whether it's enmeshment, whether it's manipulation on behalf of a strong dominant parent to the kids, a lot of control issues. It's common also because of those family ties to see parents that enable their kids with behavior that's inappropriate, that is not taking into account the family rules or understandings, or addictive behaviors. But also this high view of family ties has a very negative aspect as well, that can create things like sexual abuse or domestic violence that oftentimes is covered up for fear of what's going to happen to the perpetrator, which is a family member. So family ties can be really good. In some sense, it's a great example of the connectedness, the strong ties between believers as a church, but it also can have some very negative impacts. Another part of Hispanic culture is how they view the marriage commitment, which is very seriously, especially in the immigrant generation. Um, a lot of times a couple will prefer to just stay together no matter how much conflict, no matter how much stress and problems there are, instead of even conceiving of the opportunity or the alternative to give an opportunity for a temporary separation, to provide the motivation for an abusive spouse to reconsider their behavior, the way they conduct themselves, or the motivation to get help. A lot of times Hispanic families, couples will just stick together and have a view that it's just going to get better. We need to stick together. A lot of times this comes out with some external pressure from mom, dad, grandpas, to aunts, uncles that are saying, y'all need to just stick together. Another aspect of Hispanic culture that is important is that there's still a high degree of stigma, negative stigma to mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar, depression of different varieties, anxiety disorder. A lot of times it's spiritualized, attributed to only or exclusively demonic influence and things like that, spiritual warfare. A lot of times it's minimized, especially depression. Oh, just get over it. A real severe depression. A lot of folks in the Hispanic community used to believe that you just get over it. Motivate yourself, things like that. Or sometimes they're also mystified. Sometimes things like PTSD is attributed to something that is not accurate, although the event or the thing that happened could be very stressful and the stress itself becomes a trigger, but a lot of times it's kind of seen in that way. There's also a high degree of fear, as I mentioned, of being called or perceived, or that that a professional is gonna say that you're crazy. That's also something that is a fear regarding mental illness. The other fear that is common is the fear of medication. Uh, there's a huge hesitation with Hispanics with taking things like antidepressants, medication that helps with relaxing, different types of medication in the mental health realm, because of the addictive nature of it, or that the side effects are going to cause more problems than what I already have. That is still very, very present, very common. Another aspect of Hispanic culture that I think is worth noting is that their view of suffering, pain and suffering. They're much more, I wouldn't necessarily say it's fatalistic, but it's more accepting of the reality of suffering. In other words, a lot of times we'll hear someone say, well, that's because of my problems, my pain, or my suffering. That's what God intended for me. There's this underlying view of pain and suffering as something that everyone goes through. So it could be a good thing. It could be not so good. Just depends. Another factor that I think is characterizes Hispanic families is that religion is very important. Um, so this doesn't necessarily mean that they're more spiritually mature as an ethnic group, but that they're just more readily available to receive religious principles or to see a minister as someone that's worth trusting, at least initially. It can also lead to something like uh, feeling that all of life's problems with the family crisis are going to be resolved with prayer. Or just pray, and eventually God's going to give you the solution. Which prayer is extremely important, but not to the exclusion of other things. Um, but it can also be very helpful, this view, because uh, sharing biblical principles, biblical truth is something that is not confronted by a lot of skepticism towards the Bible or God or the existence of God or the need for God's intervention in our lives. It can also be very helpful because viewing religion as something valuable to life, um, in Hispanics, it is more likely that they will seek out the help of a pastoral counselor as opposed to a secular psychologist or that type of help. Now, some Hispanics, in this realm, this view of a religion can also take them to seek help with someone like a hand reader or someone involved in cards or tarot or stuff like that. But Hispanics are much more open to religious views, religious principles. One of the other things that's very important, and I think if you Google this, you'll find that there's a lot of explanation, a lot of content in the topic of machismo. Um, it undergirds, in my opinion, a lot of family relationships. Um, I believe, from what I've seen, that it's much more prevalent in Mexico and Central America as opposed to a lot of the South American countries, with maybe the exception of Brazil. That's just purely an opinion. Um, but this involves the defining masculinity in traits or terms of a dominant, fear invoking, father, husband, man, head of the house. Um, it manifests itself with males, the belief that males should never be weak, should never therefore demonstrate their emotions or open up about their true feelings. They should solve their problems with their fists or with a fear. So not knowing how to view emotions correctly or how to sort them really handicaps emotional maturity and causes clearly some barriers to emotional closeness to spouse, kids. Um, so I think machismo is in depending on the region where they're from and the type of sub culture within the broader Hispanic culture, you'll see more of that or less of that. Um, I think pastorally great way to approach a male with that topic is to show them. So I think the Gospel of Mark is especially helpful with showing how Jesus shows his emotions. Jesus weeps, he cries, he is lonely, he is angry at times, but righteous anger. His emotions, especially maybe Mark 4, 5, 6, right around there, shows some of the emotions that Jesus demonstrated. Another topic is immigration. I know it's very politicized. I know it's very controversial right now. But the realities that undocumented immigrants in the United States live is very real, and the impact of that on families is very real. Um, Fear is that fear can be on top of already a stressful family, and you, because of finances, because of the uh, family problems, relational problems, and then on top of that, you've got just this kind of overriding anxiety that day in, day out, especially on driving on the roads, on the highways, that they'll be stopped and deported without the due process, which is something that happened. We talked to a lady. We met her because of that happened. So there's a fear of that being deported, and because deportation means being separated, with a lot of question marks. What's going to happen? Where are they going to drop them off? How's he going to get back? Is he going to get back? On the border, there's a lot of crime. Um, the other aspect of the immigration issues facing our society and how it impacts Hispanic families is that, and because of that fear of talking to any authority figure or a law enforcement person or some security agency or agents, Hispanics are very, very hesitant to call and report crimes against them, crimes against their neighbors, crimes against someone that they see passing by, but also crimes such as domestic violence in their own home, or a family member, sexual abuse in their own home, or someone that they know, because of that same fear. And and finally, I would say that Hispanic, Latino, and I think those terms, I certainly use them interchangeably. Uh, they don't all fit in one basket. There are multiple subcultures within the big Hispanic culture. Uh, because of the variety of elements, such as is this family of origin rural or urban? What degree of education have they had? Did their parents have education? Their grandparents have degrees? That makes a big, big difference. What type of uh, uh, nationality are they from? Argentines are different from Chileans, which in turn are different from Colombians, in turn different from Costa Ricans, Guatemalans. Uh, Places like Mexico, you have northern Mexican versus southern Mexican. And then on top of that, are you talking to a family, or are you relating to a family that they are the immigrant generation, or that they are the children of the immigrant generation? Huge difference, very, very huge difference. You could see a couple at any given moment, and they're both Hispanic, they're both speak both languages to some degree or other, but culturally they have a significant amount of differences. But having said that, these are what I think are some of the broad stroke commonalities, especially seeing them through the lens of pastoral counseling. And a lot of these are related to beliefs, and so I think beliefs and culture always are intertwined, and then those in turn are affect behavior. So I hope this has been helpful. You can check us out a little bit on Facebook, Ministerio Corazones Unidos, our website, also HispanicMarriages.org, and hope you enjoy the rest of your training. God bless you.